Okay, so here we are. This is the 25th Sunday in Ordinary Time, and like I said, I hope everybody did okay through the hurricane, and hope now getting back to normal. So, but if not, certainly reach out. We're happy to if we can help in any way we can, let somebody know. All right, so we'll go ahead and start in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And remember, so today is the feast of Our Lady of Sorrows. So, O God, who willed that when your Son was lifted high on the cross, his mother should stand close by and share his suffering, grant that your church, participating with the Virgin Mary in the Passion of Christ, may merit a share in his resurrection, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, God, forever and ever. Amen.
In our community in Williamsport, Pennsylvania, we had a large Italian community, still does, and their church was Mater della Rosa, which is the Mother of Sorrows. It's no longer operational though because of cutbacks, but
okay, so we have I'm going to go ahead and I've got there are the readings if you want to pull them up if you haven't already, and if you want to follow along. I think the readings are really good. They're really good for discussion if you haven't already read over them. And again, what I also point out is that our first reading comes from the Book of Wisdom, which is one of the, I guess you quote unquote, Catholic books, right? So it's one that you're only going to hear in the Catholic Church. So attributed to Solomon, and I use the word attributed very loosely. So it is attributed to Solomon, although it is most likely written during the time of when the Hellenization period of Israel. But anyway, so here we go with the Book of Wisdom, and listen very carefully that the author is saying the wicked say. Okay, so he's saying this is how wicked people think. Okay, this is what the wicked people are going to say. Let us beset the just one, because he is obnoxious to us, and he sets himself against our doing, reproaches us for the transgressions of the law, and charges us with violations of our training. And I like that because it's well, one, obviously it's telling about what Jesus is going to face, but it's also this whole idea of the wicked person. And what's the wicked person going to do when the just person comes into contact with the wicked person? The wicked person doesn't say, let's listen to him or her and let's say, wow, they are saying things that we really need to hear. Let's change our ways. They don't say that. They say instead, let us beset them. So let us assault them, because they are obnoxious to us. Why? Because they set themselves against our doings, because they're telling us things we don't want to hear. They are holding up that mirror to what we are doing, and we don't like it. It's kind of that whole idea of, I was thinking about it with the morning group. I think that's one of the big detriments, if you will, to social media, in that before social media, you had your community that you lived in, but your community was made up of all different kinds of people. My neighbor may not vote the same way that I do. My neighbor may not go to the same church that I go to. My neighbor may not have the same views on education as I do, but they're my neighbor, right? Now we go online and we find these communities that just become echo chambers. They just become a group of people who all already agree with me. And the worst part of it is, the longer we're in that situation, the more we start to think that our views are the normal ones. Because we think, all these people from all over the world are in this group, and we're all justifying each other, and we forget to say, wait a minute, there are a whole lot of people out there that don't think this way. We start to think that, well, everybody thinks this way, or it starts to become justified or normal, right? And all of a sudden, abhorrent behavior becomes normal, because now you have a community of people that all participate in abhorrent behavior, and you all tell each other, oh, it's fine, I do it too. It's kind of that whole we put ourselves, the whole, what is it, the thieves, right? You have a bunch of criminals, and if you're a criminal and you hang out with other criminals, before long you're going to start to think that being a criminal is okay. You're going to lose your ability to understand why wider society doesn't like that. So he's saying, when this person comes, this person who is going to infiltrate, who is going to come from the outside into our little group and is going to say, what are you doing? We don't want to hear from that person, because that person is going to charge us with violations of our training. And of course, this leads right to the way Jesus talked to the Pharisees, right? They were supposed to be the leaders and the teachers of the law. And Jesus is saying, no, you violated your training. You have transgressed the law that you have supposedly given your life to upholding. I think this would be one of the reasons, like, why people are so rightfully upset when we learn about corruption in, say, the police department or in the government, because these are all people who have stood before us and publicly sworn that it was going to be their duty and life's work to uphold the law, and then to find out that they've been transgressing it for personal gain. They've been abusing their status. They've been abusing their office for personal gain. And then look what happens next. He says, the wicked say, let us see whether his words be true. Let us find out what will happen to him. For if he is the just one, if the just one be the Son of God, God will defend him and deliver him from the hand of his foes. With revilement and torture, let us put the just one to the test, that we may have proof of his gentleness and try his patience. Let us condemn him to a shameful death, for according to his own words, God will take care of him. This is the most twisted logic you could ever imagine, because essentially what they're saying is, if he really is from God, then God's going to protect him. And we'll all know he's from God, because God will swoop down and save him. But if he's not from God, then he's a liar, and we're completely justified in our treatment, right? So it's kind of the whole, we're going to torture you a little bit and see if God comes to help you. And if God comes to help you, then we can say, see, we were only trying to show that this man really is God. We were giving him an opportunity to prove his gentleness and try his patience, right? But if God doesn't come down and save him, well, then we were right, and he deserved everything he got. You see the twisted logic there, and people do this all the time. This kind of logic that we will. It's the whole. I'm going to come up you as a Christian or something like that. I'm going to come up to you and spit in your face, and if you respond, well, now you're showing me that you're not really a Christian, because you're responding with anger. And so you've just proved that you're not. But if I spit in your face and you take it, well, why didn't God come save you? Right? So it's kind of the whole, I should be able to do whatever I want to you, but you can't do anything to me, because if you do, then it somehow proves that you're not who you say you are. It's very twisted. But why that is why the writer of wisdom prefaces all this with the wicked say. This is how wicked people behave. It's the whole, like, again, recently, right? We can't, not recently, within the last several years, the whole idea, for instance, like, people using women and children as human shields in wartime situations. And essentially what they're doing is they're saying, if you are who you say you are, you will not fire on them because they're women and children. But if you don't fire on them, we're going to use them as shields to fire on you. Right. So it's this same type of logic. It's a kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation for the person that they're talking about. The just one. And of course, the just one is Jesus, right? The just one is Christ, who is what does Jesus do? He comes to the people that are in power. He speaks truth to that power. And because of that, they find him to be obnoxious. I mean, you could think about at the foot of the cross, what are they saying? If he really is the Son of God, let God come. Why doesn't he take himself down off that cross? Or why doesn't Elijah come and save him? Right? And even Pontius Pilate says, if you really are a king, where's your army? Right? Where are your followers to defend you if you really are a king? So any thoughts about that? Any questions about that? Comments? I think if we think about it in terms of us today, more of like in a not necessarily in a theological sense of pointing towards Christ and his passion, but if we look at it in a pastoral sense of how is this applicable to us today, I think it's for us is a reminder that as a Christian person, we are to be just. Go ahead, Vance. You got to unmute.
You just make me think about so much of today's TV and how they have such a megaphone for a voice, so that in the internet too, there's so many people out there that quote unquote just start following somebody because it sounds similar to what they want to hear, or that maybe they believe. Hopefully they believe it if they follow them. But I think that is a huge issue with morality and what people do, because there's so many distractions and so many places that you can go and hear things that are similar to what these people are saying. Oh, well, if you're a Christian, just like you were describing, that's so real to me.
Well, and I think it's also it's that whole, I remember even when we were younger, and my dad telling us it was when, and now I feel like I'm betraying my age, that when cable news was first getting started, right? And all these cable news channels were probably, I remember my dad saying, just remember when you're watching this stuff, you can believe none of what you hear and only about half of what you see. And that they have a demographic and an agenda that they are aiming at, and you're probably not it. But it does make me think about, like, today, again, if you are going to try to live a life of truth, and by truth I don't mean truth in the sense of always being of being just completely totally truthful in the sense of all I just say what I say, but I mean capital T truth. You're trying to live a life, which is what James will describe when we get down to his letter. You're trying to live that out. You have to be prepared for people not liking it. Matthew and I were actually talking about this right before class started, and it was, this whole idea of, my youngest brother, he keeps saying he's just ready to just check out. He's ready to just say, I I see the direction that society is going, and I don't know that I can be part of this anymore. How about this? You don't bother me and I won't bother you. The problem is that's not going to work because they are going to bother you. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, they are going to bother you. But the idea is kind of, even within people that call themselves Christians or Catholics, it's really a small percentage of people. And I would say I definitely, fall into this, but that it's really a very small percentage of people that really truly fully orient themselves towards God. Most of us, I would say myself included, have good days and bad days, right? Some days you're better at it than others. But then there are, like today, we had dealing with stuff from the hurricane, dealing with stuff with my wife's car and shuttling kids around and all this other stuff. It's like, I admit it, my mind was on a million different things today. And it was all oriented towards the world. And but if we choose to orient ourselves towards God, you just have to realize that is going to put you at odds with society in many ways. Because what you are going to view as successful is not how society is going to view success. What you are going to view as progress is probably not what society is going to view as progress. What you're going to view as a good life is probably not what society is going to view. So you are going to be ostracized. You will be the odd one, right? Because you don't do what everyone else does. Again, just thinking about some of these things that you see, and just my goodness, I was reading the news this morning and over half of the articles were about the Met Gala that just happened and about who was wearing what at the Met Gala. And you just think, who cares? Who cares? There are so many things going on in the world and in our own backyard, but you've got 10 articles up talking about who wore what dress. But the people that are in that world, they think that's really important. That's a really big deal to know who got in the news for wearing what. And of course, nowadays, it also seems like the best way to get into the news for what you're wearing is to wear something that would probably make Adam and Eve even blush, I think. So I don't know. I don't know where we're headed, but I don't know if it does not appear to be a good direction. So anyway, okay. Anybody else? Any thoughts, any questions, comments about this particular reading?
Yeah, I have a comment if I can, Jason. I hear sometimes people saying, we got this media and then this news and they bombard us. And also I hear some people that said, I don't watch news anymore. I'm completely out. I don't believe on anything. So I can see the two extremes there. So what I'm trying to do, that's what I say. What I'm trying to do, not to listen to all the news, try to listen if I can, read documents or information that are useful. So I think, unfortunately, we are complaining about this, but I think we have some responsibility, or I do,
yes,
in a sense that they don't force you. Yeah, we still live, let me tell you, US is still a free country, whatever we think.
Yeah.
You got to leave outside to believe when you don't have your freedom. So even though there is, let's say there is a lot of influence outside, but I think if we can select that, if we can, and you said it not too long ago that be Christian is difficult. Remember, what was that? C.S. Lewis that said, if you want to be a Christian, it's not going to be an easy life.
Right.
Having said that, I also believe that things happen, right? I remember when I was younger, I thought, well, I have a problem. I'm going to fix it and that's it. Next week, no more problem. Guess what? Next week, there's another one. And then another one. And then I learned that, you know what? You got to deal with things that happen the best that you can. So try to be independent, if you like. Try to be the pilot of your plane, not be just a passenger with nothing on it. Just a comment. But yeah, having said that, yes, the bombard that we have from the TV and the news is not good.
Well, and I think, and going off what you just said there, and Becky probably sees it day in, day out. But I think what you said is part of it, that we seem to have lost our critical thinking skills in a lot of ways, and we can't differentiate between news and news commentary, and we can't. And I agree with what you said. And there's one news site, and I hate to say it because you'll probably all think less of me when I do, but believe it or not, one of the not better news sites, but better about this one thing is actually the Daily Mail, the UK Daily Mail. And now, if you know what that is, you're probably thinking, "Oh my goodness, I can never listen to anything Jason says again." If you don't know what the Daily Mail is, you just don't worry about it. But I will say, when they print articles that are quote unquote, scientific or have to do with nutrition or health, if they're articles about a study, they always give a link at the bottom of the article to the actual study. So if you want to, and like what Giorgio just said, you can read the article, but go read the actual study, because so many times you find out what the news is saying this study says is not really what the study says, or they are using the numbers in a way that do not accurately reflect what the study says. And I think that's part of it, is we have to take the responsibility to educate ourselves, and to be willing to go deeper. One of the dragging this back to the religious sphere and the Catholic sphere, one of the things that I tell people is, if you come up against some teaching of the church that you struggle with, or that you find you don't like, before you just jettison that teaching and say, "I'm not doing it, the church is wrong," I always say, do yourself the service and do the church the respect of actually don't read an article about it. Like, how many of you remember recently, because Matthew and I actually been talking about this, if you even saw it, recently the Pope put out a motu proprio with some more, I would say, I guess for lack of a better term, severe restrictions on the use of the Tridentine Rite Mass, the extraordinary form of the Mass. He just reversed what Pope Benedict had allowed. He didn't add restrictions. He just said where Pope Benedict had lifted the restrictions, he just reinstated them. But anyway, Matthew and I are talking about, because of course, as soon as it happened, there's dozens and dozens of articles about what just happened and about what the Pope did. But then go read the letter. Go actually read the motu proprio and see what the Pope actually said before we get all upset because some writer says this is what the Pope said. Matthew just put it up there for you if you want to read it. And it is usually a lot more underwhelming than what the commentators say. You usually read it and you find out, oh, that's not nearly as bad as I thought that they led me to believe. Because, he didn't outlaw Latin. He didn't outlaw Gregorian chant. He didn't do any of that. He just said in the Latin Rite Catholic churches, the Novus Ordo, that's what we use here. The Novus Ordo is the norm. It is the liturgical norm. And he goes into some other things, but I would encourage you, again, read it for yourself. Or if you, and this, one of the reasons why do we give the RCIA, we always give them a catechism. Why do we give them a catechism? Because that way, when somebody says the Catholic Church believes this or the Catholic Church does that, they can look it up, because the catechism actually tells you, nope, this is what the church believes. And it is almost never what the person just said, right? The Catholic Church believes the Pope is infallible and that everything the Pope says is true. That is absolutely not what the church says, right? But you have to go dig to find that out, or the church hates gay people. The church does not hate gay people. And again, go to the actual document, see what the church actually says. So yeah, one of the things I do think is funny, this is just kind of an aside, which is talking about the motu proprio and the Latin. If you go back and you study your church history, one of the things that I think is really funny is at the time that kind of the early church fathers were starting to die off, and Latin, because the Roman Empire was becoming more and more powerful, and Latin was becoming the most predominantly spoken language in the Roman Empire, instead of Greek, because originally the masses all the liturgies were in Greek. Okay. And the church said, we're going to change from Greek to Latin. And you can go in the archives and you can find letters written by bishops and priests and people. This is the end of the church. If we switch from Greek to Latin, we might as well just throw the whole thing out. A church that doesn't worship in Greek isn't the church, right? And I just think it's kind of funny because that's exactly what we're doing. You have people saying the same thing now, forgetting that they changed it, right? Anyway, okay, better get off of that before I get myself in trouble. But yes, what Giorgio said, absolutely. Go back to the original sources, read what the original sources say, and look at that. And I think you'll be usually surprised. I went to a lecture series one time, and one of the guys that was giving the lecture, he was giving a lecture on the documents of the Second Vatican Council. And it always stuck with me. He said, I encourage people to actually read the documents. And I think you will be shocked to see what the documents do not say, right? That's so much of this stuff we're told we're doing this because of Vatican II or this, it does not say that at all. And you're also surprised at a lot of things that they do say, like how much more involvement is required by the laity and how much more we need to recognize that we live in a multicultural, multi-ethnic church and all of these other things. And that all the way back then, they were recognizing. Okay, moving on then to, I want to do the letter of James first, because I think it's just so good. And the gospel's pretty straightforward. So if we end up spending a lot of time on James's letter, that's fine. All right, so in the letter to James, which I think the letter to James sets a good juxtaposition against what we just read in Wisdom. So in Wisdom, you have the mindset of the wicked. Here in the letter of James, he says, Beloved, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder and every foul practice. But the wisdom from above is first of all pure, then peaceable, gentle, compliant, full of mercy and good fruits, without inconstancy or insincerity. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace for those who cultivate peace. So that's a good juxtaposition against the mindset of the wicked, that the mindset of the person who is seeking the quote, the wisdom from above, which something also interesting, I just think is jumping back to the book of Wisdom, even though he doesn't say it in this passage. All throughout the Old Testament, I find it very interesting in that no translators ever tried to change it, or if they did try to change it, they never got away with it. So in Jewish theology, wisdom is synonymous with the Holy Spirit. Okay, the Spirit of God is the spirit of wisdom. In the Old Testament, particularly like in the book of Wisdom, Ecclesiastes, the Sirach, all of these, wisdom is always given the feminine pronoun. Wisdom is always described as her. And I always thought that was interesting, that in Jewish theology, wisdom is associated with the Spirit of God, but yet in Jewish theology, this is pre-Jesus, wisdom is always associated with the feminine, which I just always thought was and that no translator ever got away with trying to change that. That it's always stayed that way. Especially when wisdom, you'll see wisdom with a capital W, and it's always referred to as her or she. So again, just something I thought was interesting. But so if we are seeking wisdom, that again, instead of being torturous, instead of being full of jealousy and selfish ambition and disorder, what are we going to be? We're going to be pure and peaceable, gentle, compliant. Compliant does not mean a doormat. Compliant means compliant to the will of God, not compliant to people who would seek to take advantage of you and do you harm. Compliant to the will of God, full of mercy and good fruits. And again, I like that because it's one of those where we're, again, we've already mentioned it once, but that living a Christian life can be very difficult at times, and especially when you're first starting out. And I think of it kind of like anytime you are trying to do something good in your life, it is usually really hard at first because you are trying to change bad habits. You're trying to override your own laziness, your own stubbornness. I mean, think about it when just something as simple as if you've ever said, I'm going to start eating healthier, or I'm going to start exercising more, or I'm going to read for at least an hour before I turn on the television, right? It's hard, but then the more you do it, the easier it gets. And then it just becomes habit. And then you think, I am so glad I did this because I am actually so much better off on the other side of this than I was before. And I don't want to go back to the day when I was lazy and unhealthy and all of these things, and a couch potato. I don't want to go back to those days. So, but what is it? I can't remember. It might have been St. Jerome, but I can't remember who said it. But they basically are talking about how, and obviously it's, we're talking about how like it takes 7 years to develop a good habit. It takes 7 minutes to lose one. It seems like, we struggle and struggle and struggle to build the good habit, but just like that, we break it and we're right back where we were. But if you look at what James is saying, he says, this is what the Christian life looks like. It is this person who is full of this, and they are not out for, and I like that he pairs jealousy and selfish ambition. Because if you think about it in life, a lot of times those two go hand in hand. The selfish ambition is because you want to be bigger or louder or richer or better dressed or stronger or faster, whatever, than the other person. And until you are, you're jealous of them. And when you finally do get better than them, then you're jealous of the next guy who's better. It makes me think of, when I read this morning, all I could think of was Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and Richard Branson and their rockets, right? That they are like 3 children all competing, to see whose rocket is the biggest and the fastest, right? Who's gonna, and then they have bragging rights, and then they hate the other one because he did it first, or they insult each other because the other one, it's just childish almost to watch. I mean, I appreciate what they're trying to do for science and everything, but the mentality behind it sometimes seems very childish. But then he says, where do the wars and where do the conflicts among you come from? Is it not from your passions that make war within your members? So basically what he's saying here, he's not talking about, yes, it's the individual person, but he's saying, where does this come from? It comes from envy. It comes from jealousy. It comes from ambition, because that guy over there has a little bit more than I have. So I want to take what he has so that I have it and he doesn't. You know, I always think about this with the great emperors, if you will, that why was enough never enough for them? And because enough is never enough, they always end up way worse off than they were before. I mean, think about it. You know, Julius Caesar, murdered by his best friends. Napoleon, humiliated and exiled, right? Hitler kills himself in a bunker. Stalin kills all of his friends and then dies, right? Because he thought they were all trying to get him. It's just, it just, when is enough enough? I was thinking about that. I told the morning class, I cannot remember the guy's name. He was a pirate. But he said, why is it that if I attack a town with one ship, I'm a pirate. If I attack a town with 100 ships, I'm an emperor. And I thought that's a hard argument there. So, you know, because both of them are after the same thing. They're just trying to take what these people have so they can have it, right? But what James is saying, all that comes out of our disordered passion. It comes out of our selfish ambition, that we are willing to harm other people so that we can have just a little bit more of something than someone else has. And he says, then he goes on and he says, you covet, but do not possess. Meaning you want something, but you can't have it. You covet, but do not possess. You kill and envy, but you cannot obtain. You fight and wage war. You do not possess because you do not ask. You ask, but do not receive because you ask wrongly and to spend it on your passions. So he's essentially saying, you know, you have these people that they're praying to their God, their pagan gods, but what are they praying for? They're offering sacrifice so they can have wealth or money or a victorious military campaign. And why do they want to have this military campaign? They don't want to do it because they're defending their homeland. They're out conquering for their own glory. They want to come back and they want to, you know, they want to march through the streets of Rome as the conquering hero and have everybody cheer them. And then maybe they'll be the next emperor, which again, if you read the history of the Roman emperors, I can't figure out why anyone would want to be the emperor. It almost seems like a sure way to have a horrible few years right before you die, right? Where everyone is trying to get you. It seems the worst job in the world. But people wanted it. People wanted to do it. And he said, you know, when he says you kill and envy, but you cannot obtain, you covet, but do not possess. What he's saying there is, if you are using these means to get what you want, you're going to find that even though you may win the war, even though you may acquire the wealth, you're still not going to get what you want, because what you want, what you really want, can never be obtained in this way. You're never going to get it like that. Because he says, why? Because you ask wrongly to spend it on your passions. You want to waste it. And that is just such a hard lesson. And I think in our culture, you know, we are taught that selfish ambition is a good thing. We don't say it like that because that's uncouth, right? But we're certainly taught that you do whatever you need to do to get ahead. And you want to be the, what is it? Was it Gordon Gekko, right? Remember the old movie? It was Sheen, right? I think it was Sheen. Greed is good, right? That was like the motto of the 80s. Greed is good. And you think about that, and I don't know how many of you see it, but I mean, I see it with my generation. You know, people are always talking about, you know, their hustle, right? And they're always out earning that money, and they're, you know, doing all these things to try to get just a little bit ahead. You know, they want to make sure they're the first one in the office and the last one to leave, so that their boss sees that. Why? So they get that promotion. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong. If you truly enjoy your work, you should want to do it well. I'm not saying that at all. And there's nothing wrong with being rewarded for doing your job well. But, you know, I remember there was a study done somewhere in the Northeast. I want to say maybe Boston or Pittsburgh, where they were interviewing a bunch of sixth graders about what you wanted. What do you want to be when you grow up? You know, what kind of career do you want to have? And they said the majority of them, actually, they did not choose a career. They just said they wanted to be famous, or they wanted to be rich, right? They don't care how they get there. They just want to be rich or famous. It doesn't matter what for. It doesn't matter how you got rich. You just want to be rich. And I think what a horrible way to live. But so many of us, again, like James points out, where jealousy and selfish ambition exist, there is disorder in every foul practice. If we're willing to do whatever it takes to get to that next step, well, you know, the first transgression might be hard, but the next one's going to be a little bit easier, and the next one a little bit easier after that, until we learn that we've kind of just left our conscience at the door, and we will do whatever we have to do to get ahead. And doesn't matter who we have to hurt, who we have to step on, but he's saying, no, that is not the way to live. And if you live like that, it's going to end up badly. All right. Any thoughts, comments, questions? All right. Well, if you look at the gospel, then the gospel's from Mark. And in Mark's gospel, it starts out with Jesus giving them a teaching about, he says, the Son of Man is to be handed over. They will kill him. And 3 days after his death, the Son of Man will rise. But they did not understand this saying, and they were afraid to question him. Which that's pretty typical at this point, right? They still don't understand a lot of what Jesus is saying, but they don't want to ask him about it. And I don't really, you don't really get a sense of why they don't want to ask him about it. Could it be that they didn't want him to know that they didn't understand? Could it be that they were actually a little bit frightened by what he was saying? Who knows? But they didn't want it. But instead of asking him, because they're afraid to ask him, what are they doing? They are arguing among themselves about who is the greatest. I mean, can you imagine that? Jesus just told you he's going to be killed. And instead of saying, what does that mean? You're going to be killed and rise again after 3 days. They're thinking, well, if Jesus is not the leader anymore, then who is? Well, it should be me. I'm the greatest. No, I think I'm the greatest. I think I'll probably be the leader. Which one of us is the greatest? And of course, Jesus responds to them in a sentence that actually changed Western civilization, right? When he says, if anyone wishes to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all. Because before Christianity takes hold, in the Greco-Roman world, your immortality was achieved through glory, through personal glory and status. Ambition was a good thing. Seeking out personal glory was a good thing. That's how you were going to be remembered. That's how you were going to rise in status in Rome or Greece. But Jesus is turning all that on his head, and he's saying, no, the true leader is the one that is the servant of all. And that is when the Roman Empire becomes Christendom, becomes Christian Europe. And I want to say this very carefully. theoretically, that is what the monarchies were supposed to be doing. In reality, that is not how it worked out most of the time. But theoretically, the king, queen, whoever it was, they were ordained, as it were, they were blessed because they were to be, even though they ruled, they were to be the servant of the people, right? They did not rule for their own benefit. They ruled because they were the one chosen by God to serve the people. And I said, that's why I said, theoretically, that is what the monarchies in Christendom were supposed to be doing. In reality, that is very rarely what happened. Or they might start out that way, but it usually didn't last. It usually didn't last very long. I mean, you had some good ones, like you had St. Louis, right? The King of France, who was a good king. You had Edward the Confessor, right, in England, who was a good king. You had, was it Elizabeth of Hungary, the one that was the queen or the princess that when her husband died, she took all of the royal wealth and used it to feed the poor. So you do have some, but by and large, what they instead did was said, I am ordained by God to rule, and therefore anything I say is ordained by God and therefore correct, right? Or, you know, my monarchy is blessed by the Pope, therefore, even though I'm married, I can have all these mistresses, and that's fine because I'm the king and I'm blessed by the Pope. Okay. I'm thinking of the other Louis, right? The one that built Versailles, which if you ever want something interesting to look into the history of Versailles, it is nuts. That's all I can say. It is a feat of engineering and architecture, but it is also a feat of just opulence like the world has never seen. Fascinating though. And then you can understand the French aversion to the monarchy after that, right? So anyway, but yeah, you have this, and Jesus is saying, no, we have to be servant of all. And that is, you know, especially even in the United States today, you know, there are whole leadership courses that people take, corporations that are all based around the idea of servant leadership. The church, again, theoretically, doesn't always happen. Practically, theoretically, the church is actually would be an inverted triangle, right? It's not a triangle with the Pope at the top. It's actually a triangle with the Pope at the bottom. The Pope is the servant of the entire church. The bishops are the servants of their diocese. The priests are the servants of their parishes. And we as the parishioners are the servants to the wider community. Like I said, theoretically, that's how it's supposed to be. It doesn't always feel that way. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's certainly how it's supposed to be. And of course, Jesus is telling them, if you want to be the greatest, this is how you're the greatest. And I think what I'm always left with is we even have it on a little magnet on our refrigerator. Hoping I tell the girls, I want them to try to put it at eye level so they read it every day. The problem is they're all different heights, and I think they just ignore it. But it's a quote from Mother Teresa. That quote, and I can't quote it exactly, but it's basically, most of us are not going to do great things, but we can do small things with great love. That I think is a big part of what Jesus is getting at here. It's not about being a powerful person and lording it over people and making your power felt, but rather it is about what is our little sphere of influence and how can we impact that little sphere of influence with great love. And I think do that. In fact, I've actually got it right here. We're having some of our catechist training this weekend, and from the talk, and Matthew found, by the way, this is a great little journal that the Word on Fire started putting out. It's called Evangelization and Culture, and it's a great journal. But it's he says, and I'm just gonna, he says, if you want to bring peace to the whole world, go home and love your family. Right? That you have to do that first. You are not going to do good in the wider world if you can't even do good at home. Right? If you can't even love your family, how are you going to love others? If you can't love those people who are closest to you, how are you going to love others? Interesting concept, you know. So I like that. Go home and love your family, and see how it goes, right? And hopefully it'll go well. But like I said, I think what Jesus is getting at for us, how we could take this is, again, what is our little sphere of influence, and how can we affect that through living this life that James sets out for us, and looking at the book of wisdom, being completely prepared that if we are going to set out to live this type of life, we have to understand there is a very good chance that it is not going to be received well by society. I think the best we could hope for is for maybe just society to kind of write you off. The worst is that society is going to actively turn against you. So anyway, okay. Any thoughts, questions, comments, anything you want to add to this conversation? It's a really good set of readings this week. I'm curious to see how they handle it in the homilies. So
The only thing I wanted to say is you had mentioned the Pope, that document that came out in the Catholic Herald this week, that came out, the Catholic newspaper for the diocese. They had a big section from Archbishop DiNardo that showed that there are only 2 parishes that for years have allowed to have the Latin Mass, and there's still a Regina Coeli and St. Augustine, I think, and they're the only 2 that are allowed to keep that Mass. And that other people, like there are some, it said in there, that have, like St. Teresa's in Sugar Land or whatever, that have added a Mass like that. And they're not allowed to do that anymore. They have to go to Regina Coeli or St. Augustine. So it's very detailed you're right that the Pope didn't say you can't do it, but I think they left it to the bishops to be able to discern in their diocese how that's going to play out.
And a lot of that, I don't want to, we only have a couple minutes left. And I would say, you know, a lot of it is, I don't know how much interaction any of you have with people that attend Latin masses or anything like that. But a lot of it was because Pope Benedict's idea, when he issued the motu proprio that said a priest no longer needed the permission of a bishop to offer, and I want to clarify, the Pope didn't say you can't have a Latin Mass. He said you can't have an extraordinary form Latin Mass, the Tridentine Rite, the Novus Ordo. So the Mass we celebrate now, you can do that mostly in Latin, as long as the readings are still in the vernacular and the homily is still in the vernacular. You could still do that mostly in Latin and it would be fine. That would be up to the pastor. Now, that said, so what Pope Benedict hoped was, by liberalizing the use of the extraordinary form, that it would help people to see that they would populate each other, right? Does that make sense? That people would learn to see the beauty in both forms. The problem is that's not really what happened. What actually happened is it became a source of division. And so that is what Pope Francis is concerned about, is that it has become, in a lot of ways, sadly, and I will say, this is coming from somebody, I am very liturgically conservative in that way. I like church to be quote unquote church. If I want to go to a James Taylor concert, right, I can listen to that on YouTube. I don't need to hear, okay, I'm not getting off of that. So, but that doesn't make it right or wrong. And I want to clarify that too. But I think what Pope Francis was rightly concerned about is that the Latin Mass, the extraordinary form, had become almost kind of a cliquish community, sadly, that had set itself up almost as like, we are the real Catholics, and you know, real Catholics come here, and we have our own little, and we don't associate, we're not part of the parish, we're our own thing. And I think that's what sadly moved Pope Francis to issue this, because there's certainly beauty in both rites. And it's just sad that it became more of a source of division than a source of cross-pollinating unity. So anyway, but yeah, but Matthew put the he put the motu proprio up there if you want to read it, and he also put the article from Cardinal Donardo if you would also like to read it. You can do that. So, all right, anything else before we close? And I'll let you guys go. So again, I hope you all don't have too much to clean up, and you know, we'll see. City of Houston, just like the city of Houston does, never came and picked up heavy trash this month. Maybe they knew the hurricane was coming and just wanted to get it all at once. I'll give them that benefit of the doubt. They didn't just not show up like they usually do. They knew the hurricane was coming. So, but anyway, and if you know anyone that needs help because of the hurricane, let somebody know, and we will do what we can. Okay. All right. So with that, I'll let you guys go in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. And have a good evening, and I'll see you next week.